and welcome back. I'm Bored, and I'm Savior. What are we doing today? You read the title. It's time for more Final Girl. It's time for the Frightmare on Maple Lane. But before we do that, there's something I haven't told you. Come with me. Final Girl is a game that has a lot of rules, and my first video was meant to provide you a brief overview with how things worked. There were a few things that I left out for time, and honestly, I'm not going to sit here and tell you all of those things. I mean, how much do you really care that victims panic when they witness a killing happen on their space? They panic and they move to other spaces. And how much do you care that victims can only be coaxed along with you 2 at a time as you move around the board? Those things are minute details, and they don't really factor into your decision on whether or not to buy the game. However, I also didn't tell you something amazing about Final Girl. I didn't tell you that the killers and the locations and even the Final Girls can be and are encouraged to be mixed and matched. That's right. After you defeat Hans at Camp Happy Trails, the game says, why not go see what it would be like to fight Hans on the USS Conrad, or to fight the Evomorph on Maple Lane? I didn't tell you this wonderfully fun element that adds replay value. I just didn't tell you. I'm sorry. So yeah, I just wanted to include that little detail because, I don't know, it's a blast. As you watch this video and all the rest, just remember that you can combine any location with any killer, and you can try to save the day with any Final Girl. Now, let's talk Frightmare. Dr. Franklin Wright was once a renowned dream psychologist who learned that he could manipulate the unconscious minds of his patients. After one particularly intense session, one of his patients, a teenage girl, took her own life. Her parents blamed Dr. Wright for her death and decided to take revenge. They kidnapped the doctor and they brought him to a barn just outside of town, where they used a broken pitchfork to kill the dream doctor. Only the dream doctor was able to evade death by entering the dream world just before the final killing blow was struck. Years later, the adopted daughter of those vengeful Smallies is awoken from a terrible dream where Dr. Fright appeared before her wielding the broken pitchfork that should have killed him. As the residents of Maple Lane start dying around her, it falls to this adopted daughter to rid the world of Dr. Fright once and for all. How about that for some lore? By the way, if you want to learn more about any of the baddies or the Final Girls, you should definitely check out the lore and scenario books for each series. These don't cost very much, and they provide you with both flavor and new thematic gameplay ideas. Hey, how does this game shake up the classic Final Girl formula? Let's first look at our location, Maple Lane. This is a quiet, suburban neighborhood with kids playing in the street and parents worriedly watching those kids from the windows. You see, just a few days ago, there was a murder here. And while everyone is quite sure that that was an isolated incident, all are still on edge. That on-edgeness results in a lack of trust between neighbors. Even though all these people should know you, they're wary to let you into their houses, even if it's to help them. That's why the Maple Lane location introduces the Convince action card. That's right. In order to get into any house that has a victim inside, you need to convince them that you are not in cahoots with the killer. This can sometimes feel like the victims don't even want to be saved, but they are just, rightly, I mean, look at this guy, afraid. The good news is, if you ever roll 3 successes on a Convince action card, your neighbors are so convinced of your good-heartedness that they give you an action card right from the top of the deck. If this ever happens to you, please let me know in the comments. I don't think I rolled 3 successes on any check ever when I played this particular game, and I played it like 4 times. The item situation is another interesting piece of the puzzle here on Maple Lane. In most Final Girl scenarios, you can find items in 3 designated spots on the board. On the USS Conrad, one of these was the armory, and at Camp Happy Trails, one of them was the cabins. On Maple Lane, there's an item to be found in every house, and the item card decks are broken down by direction. There's northeast, northwest, southeast, and southwest. Once you have searched a house and found the item inside, you'll slap down one of these X tokens to show that the house has been searched and there are no more goodies to be found. This isn't a mind-blowing addition, but it changes the game in an interesting way. Searching houses crosses off boxes and narrows your options as the game goes on. This can make things simpler, but it can also make things more dangerous. If you need a weapon and the only remaining unsearched houses have victims inside, you need to convince them to let you in before you can even search. And by that point, Dr. Fright may already be in your mind. Which brings us to Dr. Fright. Very much like the Nightmare on Elm Street film series that this game is based on, Dr. Fright has a close connection with a boiler room. It was his secret hideout when law enforcement tried to bring him in after the assisted suicide of one of his patients. Whenever you go to sleep in this game, which happens both due to some terror cards and can also occur when you take the short or long rest action to regain health, you will find yourself trapped in the boiler room. The boiler room introduces a fun little minigame into each round. So, let's go to the table. This is the boiler room deck as it appears when you are awake. When you go to sleep, you take this top card and you move it to the bottom of the deck, and then you flip the deck over. At the end of each killer phase, when you're asleep, you need to make a choice. Slide the cards so that the next unrevealed card is revealed, but only on one side. So I could slide this up, down, right, or left. Let's try sliding it to the right. Okay. After you slide the card, if you see Dr. Fright, he attacks you. It doesn't matter where he is on the board. If he shows up in the boiler room, you are being attacked. We were lucky this time, no Dr. Fright. At any point during the action phase, you can progress as far through the boiler room deck as you want, if you really need to be awake to do something. You see, victims won't follow you to safety while you're asleep. On the other hand, the only time you can attack Dr. Fright is while you're asleep and in the dream world with him. What makes this boiler room deck so interesting is that Dr. Fright only appears once in each of the 4 quadrants. When we slid this top card to the right, we learned that he wasn't over here on this side, which means he is somewhere over here, either on the top or on the bottom. That tells us that of these bottom 3 cards, Dr. Fright is definitely on the left 2 more times, and he's only on the right 1 more time. You're not allowed to slide the deck back the way it came from. We can't go left. So my next choice is whether to go up, down, or right again. Let's try up. Whoa. Oh no! There he is! I knew he was going to be there. I set this all up. When you see him, he attacks, but you're not out of the boiler room yet. When the next killer phase rolls around, we now know exactly where Dr. Fright isn't. Seeing him on the bottom right of this card and not on the left side of this one tells us that he must have been in this corner of the topmost card. That means because he shows up in each corner only once, he won't be on the right side for either of these bottom 2 cards. So sliding the cards this way isn't a great choice unless we want to see the good doctor's beautiful mug. The solution here is to slide the cards over this way. We know that the right side is safe, so we want to slide right as much as possible. Next time we need to slide, we can do the same thing. You can't slide the cards back the way they came from, but you can slide them in the same direction again. Let's see, and no Dr. Fright! Once you get through this boiler room deck, you can interact with victims and not interact with Dr. Fright once again. The next time you fall asleep, just shuffle up the deck, flip it back over, and try to avoid any further visits from the doc. You may be wondering, did they need to incorporate a brand new minigame? Probably not. But does this minigame turn an already delightful game into something a little bit more delightful? Absolutely. Your first choice is a straight 50-50, but everyone from then on is a question of statistics. Not everyone gets excited when they hear that a game mechanism revolves around stats, but I sure do. Before I hand down my final judgment, let's take a look at some of the thematic cards that make this scenario unique. As far as items go, there are a few that stand out. The Crucifix, that lets you stop Dr. Fright before he gets to you. The Megaphone, which allows you to move any victim on the board one space, but it draws the Doctor closer to you. And the Odds and Ends, which you can fashion into booby traps and leave them in houses around Maple Lane. Pro tip, if you have both the Odds and Ends and the Megaphone, you can draw Dr. Fright into the houses that you've booby-trapped. He's such a gullible little guy. Then we have a few delightfully thematic events. When it starts raining, all the victims on the street head inside. You could also meet the Smallies themselves, who cost you a double increase on the Bloodlust track when they die. Or you could find Officer Cop, who adds a cop car that cruises down the street, and victims can follow the officer off the street to safety. It is important to note that in a very thematic choice, Officer Cop won't do anything if he sees a victim killed by Dr. Fright on the street. Officer Cop is just passing through. You can always count on the police, am I right? As far as terror cards go, we've got a reference to the whole Nightmare on Elm Street song. 1, 2, Frankie's coming for you. 3, 4, better lock the door. 5, 6, grab your crucifix. 7, 8, better stay up late. 9, 10, never sleep again. You can also realize your own power in the dream with this terror card. It increases the Bloodlust track, but you can manifest any of the top items, you can teleport yourself wherever you want to go on the board, or you can will yourself to gain more time. Of the Final Girl games that I have played so far, these terror cards feel the most intrinsically connected to this killer. There are relatively few Maple Lane specific terror cards, so you are going to see a lot of Dr. Fright zipping around the board taking names, and that makes drawing these terror cards a very threatening thing. I'll leave most of the Finale and Dark Power cards a secret for you to discover, but I've got to show this one off. Ugh. Everyone Must Die has you remove Dr. Fright from the board. He's no longer in just one space. He is everywhere. That means he kills 2 victims per turn, no matter where they are, but it also means that you can attack him from any space. Once all of the victims are dead, there we go, you lose 4 hearts and there is nothing you can do about it. So you better take him out quick. Let me also take this opportunity to point out that Dr. Fright's killer action says that he targets the final girl or a victim, and that he attacks. It does not say that he moves as a part of this action. My first few games, I was assuming that he moved around the board during the killer action, and he was absolutely destroying me. He does not move. These terror cards give him plenty of mobility and will keep you on your toes. Unless you want to give yourself a tremendous challenge, play the game the right way and make sure he doesn't move unless you see the little boot symbol. Now, the question is, what is my rating out of 10? Interestingly, my feelings on this Final Girl game kind of mirror its movie ranking. If you'll remember from the first 2 Final Girl videos, they are based on Friday the 13th and Alien, respectively, and I don't really care for Friday the 13th, and I absolutely adore Alien. Nightmare on Elm Street lands somewhere in between those. I gave Camp Happy Trails a 6.5, I gave Into the Void a 9.5, and I am giving Frightmare on Maple Lane an 8.5. It is a rock-solid entry into any Final Girl collection with fun ideas and lots of thematic additions. The things that keep this game from reaching the heights of Into the Void are my own personal preference toward the Alien movies and my own personal lack of love for the convince mechanic. Don't get me wrong, it is a great idea, but that added step to get into houses could get a little frustrating for me, especially in games where I was already having very bad luck with rolls. And finally, one extremely minor nitpick. The game still expects you to use the convince action even while you're asleep. What's up with that? I mean, you're asleep. The victims who you're trying to convince to let you inside are awake. How are you doing that? That doesn't make sense to me. So that's kind of weird, but I will note that the player who asked this question on Board Game Geek was responded to by the designer, and the designer said, hey man, technically that's the way that it's supposed to go, but you should do whatever you find the most fun. So if you, like me, find that convince mechanic a little weird while asleep, you have AJ Porfirio's blessing to ignore it. Now, let's take a moment to remember the meeples that we lost to Dr. Fright. I will remember you. Will you remember me? How much of this song needs to be changed for it to be considered a parody? How much of this song should I change to avoid Sarah McLachlan suing me? So yeah, like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.